before you write a book, you think that writing a book is the hardest part. And you sit down and you write it, and then you realize you've got to revise it, and then you think that's the hardest part. And then you get to that point and you're like, okay, well, I want to get it published. What do I do? And you start looking things up and you look at querying and you're like, okay, cool, I can do this. And you start querying. And once you start querying and you get like 0 responses, you realize like, oh, wait, no, this is the most difficult part. and so on and so forth. It's just like, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, writing and publishing, it's like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? That's what they say. And it's so true. Like you really have to have that endurance to just believe that you're going to get there someday.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 49 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me as always is my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, MJ Kuhn. How's it going, MJ?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you, Adrian?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And a quick note for listeners, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are now live, so check the links in the description to support what we do. MJ's repping the swag right there. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming today's guest author, another familiar voice here on SFF Addicts, because we recently had Fonda Lee on, but now we have the wonderful Andrea Stewart. How are you, Andrea?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. We were talking before we recorded about the woes of parenting, but we'll take a little jaunt into something that we love today, which is science fiction, fantasy, and writing and all that fun stuff. But just to get things started, could you tell listeners and viewers a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an epic fantasy author, and I'm best known for the Drowning Empire trilogy, which starts with The Bone Shard Daughter, and the conclusion, The Bone Shard War, is coming out in just a few weeks. So that's basically what I write. I do write some science fiction, but I have no books out for that yet.
Soon, Andrew will be welcomed into the SFF broader spectrum,
the SF part.
I hope so someday.
Yes.
Congratulations on the Bone Shard War. When these episodes are coming out, the book will be releasing very, very soon. So congrats on that.
Thank you. I'm excited to complete the series. Yes,
yeah. As are we readers. I can't wait. Speaking of readers, so how did you get into reading? Like reading, sci-fi, fantasy in general? Like, do you remember when you were younger what your like sci-fi fantasy gateway drug was?
Oh gosh, that's so hard to say because I feel like it was not any kind of sudden thing. So my family is like, they're all huge nerds. Like my dad was always showing us little science experiments when we were kids.
So cool.
And we didn't watch a lot of television, but the one show that my family sat down to watch all the time was Star Trek, Next Generation. So like I grew up on that. I did read some of those kids kind of classics, right? Like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia series. I remember reading that. My first science fiction book that I read was I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. That was,
cool.
I found it like in the basement on the bookshelf. So yeah, I don't know if there was a particular great gateway drug because I just kind of felt like I was absorbing it all the time. Although I think my first epic fantasy that I read was Wheel of Time. I started reading that when I was younger. Yeah.
That is a bold first epic fantasy. It's a big endeavor.
Well, it was like my brother had it and he really liked it. So, he was my older brother. So, of course, I wanted to do everything that he did, right?
Heck yeah, right? You're like,
such a cool family. It's like dad's watching science experiment shows and showing us Star Trek. My brother's showing us Wheel of Time.
Right? It sounds like a dope family.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, so if you kind of just picked up your love of sci-fi fantasy in general through osmosis, but do you remember at all if there was a moment when you were reading or taking in any of this stuff that made you first realize you wanted to write books of your own?
Gosh. I don't know. I think the turning point for me was when I was in 5th grade and we did a creative writing assignment in class. And my teacher really liked mine, and she actually ended up reading it to future classes and everything. And I was like, oh,
Nice.
she really liked it. Like maybe I could do this. So,
Yeah.
so that's when I actually sent her a copy of my book and everything.
Oh, cool.
But that's when
the teachers
Yeah.
that support us. I love that.
they're so important. But my dad set up his old computer in the basement for me, and I just started writing on that. I wrote really bad Black Stallion fan fiction, basically.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a really long time ago. It was a computer with the black screen and the green letters. That's so that kind of tells you how old I am. That tells you that's how old I am when I first started. Yeah, I know, when I first started writing. So that was kind of the turning point for me, was that creative writing assignment.
I love that.
The teachers. I love it makes me so happy to hear about teachers who have that impact on their students, because it's I imagine your teacher, when she received a copy of your book, was just what?
Oh
my God. Yeah, exactly. Just melted. Yeah.
And she's so lovely.
It's such a beautiful thing. Oh man, because I think I've spoken to a couple other authors where it was teacher, but Chelsea Abdullah was saying how a university teacher kind of gave her a same sort of boost.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think teachers are underrated. So thank you to all the teachers and professors
definitely.
out there.
Absolutely.
You encourage people more than you know. So I know that after that, it's we've spoken before how as you got older, you spent a lot of years writing many books and querying without any luck before the Bone Shard Daughter got picked up and everything progressed from there. But what were some of the biggest takeaways for you from that time in terms of the books you wrote that never got picked up or published, or struggling in the query trenches? And then how did it feel for you when you finally got an agent and then Orbit picked up the Bone Shard Daughter, and you're just oh my God, finally.
You're yes.
I think my biggest takeaway was that it's a lot harder than I thought it was. It's one of those things where before you write a book, you think that writing a book is the hardest part. And you sit down and you write it, and then you realize you've got to revise it, and then you think that's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to that point, and you're okay, well, I want to get it published. What do I do? And you start looking things up, and you look at querying, and you're okay, cool, I can do this. And you start querying. And once you start querying and you get 0 responses, you realize oh wait, no, this is the most difficult part. and so on and so forth. It's just I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, writing and publishing, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? That's what they say. And it's so true. You really have to have that endurance to just believe that you're going to get there someday.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was my biggest takeaway from all of that. I think also I kind of had to learn to just be content with what I had, because at a certain point, you start to realize well, maybe it won't happen, and maybe I've wasted, in quotations, all this time for this goal that I'm never going to achieve. And you kind of have to learn to be okay with that, and to realize that it's not wasted time, because you were hopefully doing something that you enjoyed, and you got something out of it. So yeah, it was hard. It was definitely hard. Getting an agent was amazing. Seriously, one of the best days of my life.
Yes. Oh my gosh, right?
It's so validating, right? Because you spend so much time just working on this thing that only a few people see, And then those people that say that it's good, you're like, well, I don't know. Is it actually good, right? Because they're not necessarily professionals. They might be your
The
friends
imposter
or people.
syndrome kicks in.
Yeah, or people in your
It
writing
never goes
group.
away, though, for the record.
No.
And that's not to say that that's not to say that their opinions are not valuable, right? It's not to say that their opinions are not valuable. It's just to say that you just kind of have that doubt. So getting an agent was amazing. It was some validation. And then, I had 2 books go out on submission and die on submission. So again, there's that, that was the hardest part, right? Although to be frank, I do think that I feel like querying was the hardest part, because at least at the point where I had an agent and we were going out on sub to editors, at least like I had somebody, like a professional who was really good at what she did that was still in my corner. So I was like, okay, well, she still believes in me, right? Yeah. So so when I finally got like the first offer for the Bone Shard Daughter, oh my God, like I was so happy. We like went out for sushi to celebrate. Nice. I was just like so excited because like, when you get that first offer, like whatever happens next, it's going to be a book. It's going to be a real actual book that you can hold in your hands. And it's like life-changing, right? Because it's something that I have been working toward for so many years. So from the time that I started querying to the time that I got an offer on my book, it had been 12 years. So yeah. And that's not even counting all the books that I didn't query. So
Right. Well, and it's such a long journey. And I love that you put into words that every step you're like, this is the hardest part. This is the hardest part. Because I do think a thing that is like a word of caution that I always like try to give to people is those moving goalposts too, right? Because, when you're writing the book, you're like, I'll be happy if I can just finish the book. And then once you finish it, I'll be happy if I can just get an agent. And then once you get the agent, I'll be happy if I can just get a book deal, right? And it always just keeps moving. And so I do think it's so important what you said, to just make sure that you're appreciating. You didn't waste any time. You spent time doing something that you love.
Right. And then I
it's all a learning process.
By the time I actually did get something picked up, like I was very proud of the work that I had done, at that point. Mind you, I'm not going to go back and read it. I'm probably still going to be embarrassed, but like, at least like I wouldn't like be as embarrassed, I think, as if one of my earlier works had gotten picked up. But yeah, I do think it's really important to try to find some contentment, because it is like that. It's like, oh, well, now I got like this big book deal and like what on New York Times bestseller, right? It's like, it's always like another
that
thing.
Is always what it is. Yep.
Yeah. I think like it's okay to like want more, but like to still feel content with what you have. So I think there's like a balance to be struck there. Definitely.
Yes. Sure. I love that. Well, speaking of balance, we are talking about the challenges of parenting, which I for the listeners that don't know, I can't relate. I just listen and go, wow, that sounds fun.
MJ she's the wine aunt.
I'm the wine aunt. Yeah, that's the extent of my kid experience. But I'm just curious to know, what is your writing process like, and how does that work, fitting everything in with having, kids and the life and the because writing can be so hard to fit in no matter what your life situation's like, right?
Right. Well, I mean, first off, I don't have a life. That's like the first thing to go, right? Second off, I have to note that, I am very lucky. Like, we do have childcare during the day, between 8:30 and 4:30. And I mean, I still do have to help out like with lunchtime and everything, because it's madhouse. And then I do have to stop at like 3:30 so I can actually have time to make dinner. But like, it's like, I usually try to sit down. By the time I sit down to work, it's usually about 9:00 because I'm like still cleaning things up.
Right.
And then I usually try to do most of my word count in the morning. So I'll just like turn off the internet, which, oh my God, it is a game changer. Like, seriously, turn off your internet, people. I use
Andrea, I don't know if you do you use a program, or is that just
I
your
do because
fucking force of will?
no, I have no self-control. Come on, who's got self-control to deny the internet, right?
Yeah, say I don't have any. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
I'm just
if
gonna
you
look up a
do,
synonym, just like whatever. Don't
That's
worry.
literally why I'm always like, I can't turn off the internet. I gotta do research while I'm writing. Bullshit,
Yeah,
Mallory. No, you don't.
Yeah.
if you have the self-control to just stay off the internet without any kind of assistance, then I applaud you because you are superhuman. But yeah, no, I use Freedom on my desktop that just like shuts
Freedom.
down like all these sites basically that are time wasters.
Literally writing this down. It's just called
Yeah.
Freedom.
I'll include it in the show notes.
Freedom. Yeah, it's called Freedom. And
Yeah.
then I use Forest on my phone because, I've got my phone on me, right? So
Yeah.
I want to get that out of the way too. So it's a little app that like grows like little trees and stuff while you're away from the internet. And if you navigate away from the app for too long, then your tree dies. So
Oh no. So it's
Yeah.
like Tamagotchi,
And
but
then
for like
That would
no
be
internet.
motivation for me though. Yeah.
and then your dead tree is just there in your forest forever. So,
Haunting you.
exactly.
Oh my
And
gosh, it would though. You'd be like, this is the day I failed.
right.
Yeah.
And for a person who's like a perfectionist, like I really, really do not want a dead tree in my forest. So that is basically what I do. I turn off the internet for 2 hours and I'm usually able to get like 2,000 to 2,500 words done. And then I do the rest like after lunch.
Nice.
Yeah. But then I also have to spend a lot of time doing like social media stuff or like doing like written interview things or, it's just, yeah.
Chatting with jokers like us.
Yeah, and answering emails or, oh no, like my kid's having a meltdown downstairs. I should probably like go see what's going on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so balancing all that stuff is like really, really difficult. I am next year going to be putting the older child in full-time preschool and the younger one in full-time daycare, which I think is going to help a little bit because then I'm not going to be like constantly, because anytime I go downstairs, I'm like, oh gosh, I want a snack. And I go downstairs and like my toddler is like, mommy, play with me. And then she'll like throw a fit when I go back upstairs. I'm like, I still gotta work.
Oh no.
Yeah. So that's really rough. And I'm a sucker, I'm like, my kids are so cute. So
The struggle is real.
Yeah. And I think like a big change becoming a parent is that I used to do a lot of writing on the weekends. The weekends are no longer time off. It's like you're on call, like, on duty, especially with 2 kids. One's a toddler and one's an infant. You're basically, that's all you're doing the entire weekend. So that's my balance. It's basically just writing, kids, and like, sometimes hopefully I manage to work out on a regular basis, depending on how well they sleep. So yeah, I think if possible, I would not recommend starting a new career and having children at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would space that out
fair.
a little.
I did the smart thing and yeah, I just did that too. I'm like, my son was born. I should start a podcast. I should start writing and like taking it seriously for the first time. And it's like,
well, there you go.
bullshit.
I feel like that makes sense though, right? Like one big life shift like calls you to make another. I feel like that's probably common, even if it sucks.
Yeah, but then you come up against the roadblock of like, wow, time is so precious. But Andrew, I like that it's like, in terms of everything, it's all about intentionality. It's like, if you're going to sit down and write, turn off that internet because it wastes time.
Yeah.
It's like 2 hours. 2 hours is precious. Like,
yeah. I mean, like I said, I can get like almost my entire word count out in that time.
Yeah.
I aim for like 3,000 words a day. So, getting 2,500 in 2 hours, it's like, yeah, done. Right. Then I just have to like type a little bit more to get 500 more. So yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, speaking of babies, your book baby, the Bone Shard War is out very soon. And it's going to be bringing the Drowning Empire trilogy to its conclusion, which is crazy because it's been years of your life. And this was your first sort of like entry point into the world of being a writer and publishing and all that kind of stuff. But how did it feel for you when you sent off the final version of the Bone Shard War and you knew in your head, like, I'm not touching it again?
Oh gosh. I mean, like, I feel like I always think that I'm not going to touch it again. And then it's like, oh wait, no, there's proofs, right?
Right.
I think I sent off like edits or copy edits, like right before my baby was born. I don't remember, right after. I don't know. Anyways, that time is a blur.
It was all a blur.
So, it was definitely a blur. I think I made like a post about it at some point, but gosh, I can't recall exactly because I was running on very little sleep at that point. So I don't quite recall. I'm sure it felt great. I'm sure it did.
I'm sure it felt great. Well, with all of the characters. Oh yeah, right. You're like, all the details. I'm curious because there's so many different wonderful characters, point of view characters in the series, and I'm curious if there's certain characters you enjoyed writing the most, like which ones were the hardest to like say goodbye to as you're wrapping on this series.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely like Jovis and Lynn. I kind of focused a lot on them. Like Jovis, I think, is like the character who's most similar to me in a lot of ways. So I'm like, I'm going to miss writing him. And it's like, he thinks he's
rogue.
Well, I'm like, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to, because the way that I write him, it's like, oh, I have him make like stupid jokes and stuff. And he thinks he's quite funny. And I feel like that's like kind of how I am. So I find him very
he's funny. So maybe
I know. So
he's funny.
I'm like one of the terrible people that like laugh at my own jokes. And he's definitely like that kind of person as well. He's definitely more grumpy than I am. But yeah,
He's been through some shit though.
It's fair. He has reason to be grumpy.
He does. But I think like all of them kind of are reflections of some piece of me in some way that I've just kind of put into those characters. Like I'm definitely going to miss like Renami and Falu. Like I really enjoyed writing how the relationship developed and the things that they went through together and how they changed. I think like that's one of the things I'm going to miss is just kind of writing that change into the characters and to see like where they end up, because like now it's like done, right? And they're going to continue to change after that last page, right? Because everybody continues to change. You're never the same person you were like 7 years ago, right? But I think that it's like something that's out of my hands now, right? It's not something that I'm going to revisit with. I mean, I don't think I will. So yeah, it's this kind of sad goodbye where you're like, well, I've left you in a good place. I mean, most of them, right? In somewhat of a good place. I mean, Adrian knows, he's read it. Yeah. But like, I've left you in a place where this story is done. And it's always kind of sad to say goodbye at that point. But it's also really great too, in a lot of ways, because you're like, well, I got this like other new shiny idea. So.
Yes, right? Now you're free to chase it.
And new disaster characters. Yeah.
It's all about disaster characters. Well, yeah, like, I mean, touching on that, just in terms of your feelings of finishing that series and you said like, I probably won't return to it. But, you know, I could hear in your voice, there's a part deep down where you're like, maybe. Maybe
someday, like, if the right idea came along. I mean, I love the world, so.
Yeah, but do you feel like you're ultimately satisfied with the time you spent with these characters? But if you were to return, do you think you would do like a different time period?
It would definitely be a different time period, yeah.
Like, let's go see the Alanga when they were like back in their
I was going to say, it's such an expansive like lore and world. There's so much you could do with it, right?
Yeah, I'm not like a huge fan of prequels though, but yeah. I'm kind of like curious to see what would happen like later on in that timeline. Like after I don't want to, spoil anything. But,
right, after Redacted.
After Redacted, yes.
Just black out the whole screen. You're not gonna pull a Robert Jordan and write like a New Spring prequel novella, which is actually a novel, because it's not a novella, it's Robert Jordan.
I was going to say novella.
Like, I think he wrote it after like over a handful of books into the series, but you know, for me too, it's like I would love to see like old grumpy Jovis, you know? It's like him in like 30 years, like in The Expanse, where they do like a time jump between, I think it was like book 6 and 7, be like, oh, you're just like, you're the same old you, but you're just a little scruffier and with like some gray hair and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, to touch a little more on the characters in there, one of the things I love about talking to writers is that I feel like all of us, even no matter how much of plotters versus whatever, there are still things that our characters do that just surprise us, where it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Did you have any moments like that during your series where a character, a plot, something developed in an unexpected way, and kind of left you going like, oh God, now what?
I feel like, so I tend to be pretty hard on the outline side. So I don't know if there's anything like, yeah, I know. I don't know that there was anything that really surprised me, because I mean, especially like I planned out a lot of these like reveals and everything, and I wanted them to kind of play out in a certain way. I mean, I did have to do a lot of rewriting, but I always like outline before I rewrite. Yeah. So like, I mean, I guess things surprise me at the outlining level, but then is it really a surprise? Like, I don't know.
I think it still counts.
Yeah.
Spoken as a fellow hardcore plotter. Because, you know, there's those moments where you feel like the outline is going one direction and then you're like, oh, or shit, what if? And then it takes it. I feel like that still counts. So,
yeah, I mean, I think like probably some of the stuff that happens in the beginning of like the third book were a little bit surprising to me. Like I didn't know that it is like a 2-year time jump between books 2 and 3. And I didn't know I was going to do that until I really kind of thought things through and thought about what made the most sense as far as the plot goes and where the characters end up. And then I realized that it didn't make sense for me to start and then have that time jump. So I just went ahead and had that time jump at the beginning, basically. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. Other than that, I know like people say like, oh, well, my character spoke to me this way and everything, but I'm like, nope, you guys stay in your line. So
I love it. I love it.
You treated your book like parenting. It's just like this is the way, you know.
Right. I mean, I feel like
fucking Mandalorian on this.
I feel like there can be like little like tiny deviations where I'm like, well, I didn't know that they were going to eat this for lunch, right? But you're like at the same time, like the greater things, like I'm like, well, these are the things that, yeah, like parenting. I'd be like, well, I have to put my foot down on this. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, this is just not going to work.
Yeah. So stop it, Jovis. Stop
I know. I love that. Character wrangling. It's a good skill set.
Well, how's that going with your next series? So this is The Gods Below, which was picked up by Orbit as a trilogy. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that and like how the writing process has been going with that?
Oh, so... Well, I'm discovering that my writing process is to write a bunch and to then throw it away and then start over, which I'm not thrilled about, but apparently that's what works.
Just like a cool 60,000 words.
I did. I was like, all right, okay, but this doesn't feel good, so I'm gonna toss it. Yeah, so it's set in a world that's kind of undergone this magical apocalypse at some point in the past. And the world has been separated into realms where I'm like, what was my pitch for this book? My God.
How did I sell this to Orbit?
How did I have like, see, I really should have just pulled up, like, cause I have like a whole pitch document. Wait. About like, that I sent to Orbit. And I did talk about the magical apocalypse. And I talked about also, there's like a magical system of like these god gems that wait, let me, sorry, I'm like seriously pulling it up right now.
I love
Didn't
it.
you tell me something about like you told me once about like
Look,
spelunking,
I'm a
there's
writer.
caves and
I'm
spelunking.
like, yeah, I know, right? I'm like a writer. I'm not like a speaker or a talker is what I tell people. Oh yeah. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So
Orbit
basically,
pitch. Let's go.
I know. I'm not going to read this to you because I feel like that's unnatural, but it is set in this world that has undergone this magical apocalypse that was due to an overuse of this ancient kind of magic. And what happened is that hundreds of years ago, this man went out on this quest to make a pact with this god that would allow the world to be restored to its former glory, pretty much, right? And this world, it's like a hollow world, and the gods live in the center. And the other main thing is that magic is in the air, and it exists in the air underneath the ground. And it increases in concentration the deeper you go underground, but it's also toxic to mortal people that breathe it in. And then, of course, there are some people that can use it. And I feel like I'm like rambling again. But yeah, there's like there's creepy caves. There are people that have been like transformed during this restoration. That's when they restore these realms. And basically there's this whole kind of feeling of, is this restoration necessary? Is this what they really want? Because it basically disappears like half the people in a realm, and it alters the rest of them into these kind of monstrous forms. So,
Ooh.
yeah. And it centers around two characters who are sisters, and they get separated in the beginning by this cataclysmic event. And basically one of them is trying to always find her younger sister, who she's like kind of responsible for. And the other one ends up on the other side of this kind of clandestine war between the gods. I feel like this is the most poor way I've ever explained it. And I
apologize.
love it.
It's fascinating. I love the magic system you're describing. It sounds so cool.
The Faustian bargain, kind of like apocalypse too. Really
yeah. So there's like people that are trying to break this pact. There's like a whole secret society. And then there are people that just think that this is like the best way to go about things. And there's all these themes about displacement and misinformation and disinformation. So those are things that I've really been thinking about a lot. And I wanted to kind of utilize those in a story, or at least explore my thoughts and feelings about it in a story, because that's how it goes, right? You're like, like this is like really weird, and I kind of want to like write it out, right? And like really kind of figure out what it means to you. So,
for anyone who thinks that fantasy can't tackle societal or political issues,
right?
Just realize that we think about this stuff.
Oh,
and it just
yes. We think about it a lot.
Yeah, we think about it probably way more than anybody needs to, but
yeah.
More than is mentally healthy for us.
Exactly. That's turn off your internet.
I mean, like one of like the whole things with the Drowning Empire series is I was thinking about that trope in fantasy where there's like the evil overlord or king or whatever, and then he's deposed or she is deposed by someone who is like a good ruler. And I'm like, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, what does it mean to be a good ruler? And is one person ever going to be enough or like satisfactory, or is that even like, okay, in an ethical and moral standpoint? So yeah, that's like one of the things that I was exploring through that series.
Love that. I love that. I can't wait to read it. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, Adrian knows how it ends. So.
Oh, do you really? Well, don't tell me.
No, I told you. I finished the book earlier, like last week.
Oh, that's right. But still don't tell me.
I'm not going to say anything.
No spoilers.
I didn't threaten you with anything.
I'm just jumpy. Okay, right. So you're diving into this.
Calm the fuck down, MJ.
I will not. I cannot be tamed, okay? Sorry. So you're diving into this new trilogy right after finishing a trilogy. I kind of want to dive into that a little bit because how intimidating is that, or is it not? Was there a part of you that was like, maybe I should have done a standalone or like a novella, something short in the middle as a breather? Or is it like, yes, I'm so excited to just get some more chonky books out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've never written a standalone. Oh God, I just I really just like being able to explore through the multiple books thing. I think at some point, yeah. I mean, I'll obviously I'll write a standalone, or I'm very interested in writing a novella at some point. Um, but I think my one true love, right, is epic fantasy, because I do feel like, especially in the format of a trilogy, I really like that you can you have like that complete story in one book, but you have that overall arc over the 3 books. And I just really enjoy that structure. And I really enjoy the fact that you can explore more of the changes that the characters undergo, or the effects of those changes. So if you have your character changing in one way in book 1, and they're like, okay, this is who I am now. Well, what are the ramifications of that in book 2, right? What challenges do they face, and how cleanly do they stick to that character change when they're faced with actual challenges? So I really, really enjoy that kind of format. And I have to say, like, you were just talking about Fonda Lee. I love how she deals with generational stuff over the course of her 3 books. Like, I would love to do something like that someday as well. But yeah, I think jumping into another trilogy was challenging in the sense that I was like, I mean, you've always got something in the pipeline, right? You're writing something and you've got ideas floating around, but I hadn't completely fleshed out this world. So I did have to spend a lot of time world building. Like, after I did the pitch, I'm like, okay, well, I have like, the big idea of what it's like, but like, what's the nitty gritty? Like, what do they eat? Right.
Yeah, right. The stuff you need to know, but you don't.
As with Andrew, it always comes down to food. Like, what?
What are they eating? Like, yeah. I mean, they're living,
important,
especially in this world where, I mean, in my prior one, in the Drowning Empire, it's like, oh yeah, they're like on the ocean. They're going to have like a lot of cool seafood. And this one, they're like, oh, well, our landscape is like desolate and hot and like filled with dust. Like, what are they eating?
Right.
Yeah, they're eating something, and it's probably not bad. But yeah, it was a lot of trying to figure out the nitty gritty. And I think that's like why I ended up writing 60K, tossing it, and then starting over, is because I thought I gotten to the point where I knew everything. Like, I knew the characters, I knew the world. I started writing, and as I was writing, it's when I discover that, no, wait, there are all these questions that I still have to answer. So I basically put it aside for, I think, like a month, and just like, I have so many documents now that I just like started writing, and like, well, what's the problem here? And what exactly is their economy like? And what is their government like, the structure of this? So that was challenging. Yes, actually sitting down and doing all that world building for something that had previously existed in a vague sense in my head. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love this, like, core questions. Like, let's get down to the nitty gritty, and like, what do they eat? Like, how are these people surviving and everything like that. But at the same time, it's like, just the like, I can imagine. I have a friend who's at this point where she's like, she's come up against roadblocks because she doesn't have the world building fleshed out enough. Like you were saying, and it's like, how can I fucking continue? With that, if I'm just like continuing to ask myself so many questions.
It feels like it's going to be, it theoretically should be an easy thing to solve, right? Because it's like, well, I just have to make it up. But like, yes, but in a way that makes sense.
Right, in a way that doesn't break everything I've written before.
Yes, yep.
Well, I think for me too, like, reader immersion is so important to me. And in order to really feel like they're immersed, I feel like you got to know what your world like smells like, what it feels like, what are the little realistic interactions that people are having in the background. Like, I think you can't know that without knowing your world well.
Agreed. And to close out, I would like to ask you a 2-part question. If you could give listeners and viewers a good bit of soundbite writing advice, although this whole conversation has been sprinkled with a lot of good writing advice, and B, because I know you like weird and random facts, if you could tell us a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating.
Oh gosh. Oh no, this is something I should have prepared for. A good bit of soundbite writing advice. I know you sent me the questions, and then I spent like all night trying to keep my child in bed.
Oh no.
Let me see. I like just did a TikTok about writing advice, and now I'm like trying to remember what exactly I had said. I was talking about writing beginnings, and I think like a good piece of writing advice would be that it's okay for your reader to be a little bit confused when they start your book, especially when you're writing fantasy or science fiction, because you are going to have terms and things and magic that people may not understand when they're starting your book. And I know that sometimes newer writers have a tendency to kind of over-explain things in the beginning because they're like, I don't want my reader to be confused. It's okay for them to be a little bit confused in the beginning, because I think that's part of the thing that keeps readers going, is that you present a question like, well, what is this thing exactly? And then you answer it maybe just a few paragraphs later. And you're kind of leaving this trail of breadcrumbs. So I think that would be my piece of advice, is that it's okay for your reader to be a little bit confused.
I like it.
I love that.
Weird or random fact?
Oh, a random fact. Okay, I don't know if I've said this before, but I'm super fascinated by giant sloths, megafauna.
Okay. I did not expect it to go there. Cool.
I have no idea where I expected that to go. Not there. Love it.
Yeah. So speaking of creepy caves, like they're actually they're these giant burrows that these giant sloths have built and dug, and they still exist. So they have them in like South America. And you can go and like see pictures online if you look it up, where they're just like, people are just standing in these huge burrows where you can see the claw marks on the side where the giant sloths were like digging things out. So I'm just like, oh my God, that's so crazy and so cool.
That is fascinating. I love that.
Okay. I'm looking it up right now. It's in southern Brazil.
Yeah.
So it's like, I would say like, oh, South America, I'm here. But it's like southern Brazil is so far from me. It's like going from like Los Angeles to New York.
Little, right?
Those pits are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Obviously.
Awesome. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. As well, for anyone who contributes to our Patreon at $10 or more a month, there will be a reading by Andrea from The Bone Shard War. So go check that out before the book hits stores on April 18th. You can also hear Andrea on past episodes, including episode 7, Food and Fantasy, episode 17, Writing Sequels. So many of the things we've talked about today. And then episode, I believe it is 31, which is Nautical Fantasy. So if you want to hear more about that and her time in the Drowning Empire world. Andrea, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, so I'm at Andrea G. Stewart on everything. So that's Instagram, Twitter, sadly, TikTok. So I am on there now.
Welcome to the dark side.
I know.
Everyone's shitting on Twitter these days, but it's like it's deserved. So, we'll figure something out. Awesome. And anyone who hasn't read The Bone Shard Daughter or The Bone Shard Emperor, go check that out because they're fantastic. And then you can be so satisfied when you finish The Bone Shard War once that's out later in April.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's got good reviews so far.
You can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram and Twitter at sffaddictspod, or you can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. MJ, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me across all the main socials. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at MJ Kuhn Books.
Fantastic. And that's it for this episode. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Andrea, where we're going to do a mini masterclass on animal companions. I'm so excited about that.
Yay!
Now, keep reading, keep imagining, and see you next time on SFF Addicts.